Thanks.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to the September 19th, 2017 meeting of the School System Operations Committee. Commissioner Frank is on his way, but we're going to get started because we have a busy agenda. And I would like to start by making a agenda adjustment, if that's okay with everybody. I'd like to, because of some scheduling conflicts, I'd like to move the discussion of the Walter P. Carter feasibility study to first on the agenda.
I have no disagreements.
Martha, what do you think?
Well, since it's our decision.
I'm good.
You good? We're
All right,
good.
We're good. All right, let's start there. You good?
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, he won't be here this afternoon? He won't be here. He didn't tell me that. Okay. Okay.
All right, ladies, if you could introduce yourself and let's get started with Walter P. Carter.
My name is Maureen Gershberg. I'm the senior ed planner, and I helped kind of with the initial process of this.
Can you do us a favor? Can you move the microphone a little bit closer to you? It was really hard.
My name is Maureen Gershberg, and I'm a senior ed planner with City Schools.
Nicole Price, Director of Community and Public Relations for 21st Century School Buildings, handled the community engagement portion for this project.
I think a new part of the presentation needs to be pulled up.
Still have to take notes on these.
Okay. All right, well, just to give you some background while they're pulling up the presentation, the proposed plan is going to be a co-location with the Lois T. Murray Separate Public Day School and the Walter P. Carter Elementary Middle School. As part of the guidance from the state is they no longer want separate public day schools, so with our 21st Century Plan, we've been creating co-locations with our separate public day schools, and this is going to be one of those. The site is located in northern Baltimore. Do I have a way of zooming in on this? No? Okay.
Is it okay if we interrupt with questions on the way?
Yeah, go for it.
Just a quick question related to policy and moving forward with the co-locations of separate day schools. Understanding that this is an equity issue, is co-locating just creating an equity division within a building? And I know this is beyond your scope, but does it make more sense to have a school? And we have all of our students in a school to address the whole child needs versus having a separate day school that simply shares a geographic address with another school.
So actually, I can provide some clarification on that. Right now, the state guidance says that students who need that level of service need to spend at least 50% of their time within that environment. And so we kind of have gone back and forth. And so when we create these plans, we make sure we have a clear designation on the plans showing the different spaces. So it is more of a co-location setup, but we also make sure that there's a continuum of services located. So at Walter P. Carter, they have an early learning environment program. So again, should kids be able to kind of graduate to the next level of service above what they currently are, that service is available on site. And we are creating, there is circulation between the two programs, but there are doors that are able to be locked off. And so should that model be what is wanted later on, that opportunity is going to be there.
So I mean, I understand FAPE and I understand a proportioning of school day to different settings by different classification levels, but having two different names in and of itself says you're not part of our school community. And so if we want students with special needs to be truly invested in a part of a school, then having a separate school name or separate school, even within the same building, says, nope, you're different, you're not us. And I just want to be really mindful of that as we look towards an equity lens moving forward.
Not for this particular school. One of the things that we're looking at for like Patterson and Claremont, which is also another co-location, we're developing a committee now with students. We actually had a youth worker who worked with us over the summer from Patterson. We're retaining her through the school year. One of her jobs as a intern in our office, but a student at Patterson, is to work with Patterson students to engage them in learning service hours at Claremont, so that they're bridging the relationship between the two school bodies. With the younger kids, probably harder to get an intern to work in a school setting like that, but that is something that we're looking at for Patterson and Claremont, so that we're actually deepening the relationships between the students and they don't feel like quite as separate.
But we could handle it all by creating a school culture and a school name. And it becomes especially problematic when we look at our emotional and behavioral support schools. So those kids who are possibly very typical academic development, or delayed academic development, but typical social emotional development needs, they're in a different uniform, so they become those prisoners of that program. They become those separate, those not just us. And so for the sake of this conversation, I'll table it, but just so that you know as we move forward, especially in the absence of a strict equity policy, this is what equity policies mean, and this is how they help filter. So thanks.
Okay. All right. Up here we have a site. You guess you can't see the laser pointer on the screens. Okay, so this is the site where the school is located. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a light dotted outline kind of just to the left of that light blue polygon. That's the current school, and that light blue polygon is the rec center pool that is currently there. There is a rec center on this site as well.
Polygon is the current school, or the polygon is the current rec center?
The polygon is a pool. The dotted outline to the left of that is the current building.
Yeah, okay. I just misheard.
Sorry, yeah. And maybe the next one shows it a little better. No, that's the proposed plan. Okay, and then also we're limited on this site. You'll see that light blue line running through the middle of it. That's utility lines. I think it's a storm drain. All right, and here we have the proposed plan for the new building. Let's see, and then some volumes for it. If we start here, so one of the things that we were constrained by on this site was the dramatic topography. It raises up as you head northwest, and then so dealing with loading, but then also the fact that the Lois T. Murray program had to be on one level was very difficult, because with these co-locations, we have one kitchen that serves both programs. So that was very tricky in terms of how we eventually came to this conclusion for the proposed program. You'll see kind of volumes, how the building is going to be distributed in this diagram here. Let's start on the lower level 1. The orange area is the Lois T. Murray program. And then, again, this pointer doesn't work. That light blue volume behind it, that's that kitchen area that's going to be serving both programs. And then the light blue volume in the lower right-hand corner, that's going to be the cafeteria space for Walter P. And then the Walter P. academic area is going to be that yellow area in the upper right-hand corner. If you go to level 2, again, you have that yellow is academic area, and then the blue is going to be the shared spaces.
T. Murray does have some space use on the second floor. There's a little red square
There
on level 2.
is,
You see it up there at the top?
all of the spaces should be on the ground floor.
That's why I was asking, because when I looked at this last night, I just saw that having read the text and then going back to the drawings, that red square.
Is that the media center that was?
It would be a shared, it would be light blue if it was the media center. We're going to follow up with that. Like, again, one of our parameters was that they all are one level, so going forth in design, we'll.
That's what I thought. So I'd kind of check that out, because
Yeah,
it's
sorry about
probably
that.
blue, if any, something. It's not, it probably shouldn't be red.
Correct. Lois T. Murray spaces will all be on the ground floor.
And this is is truly a stupid question.
Yeah.
The building where Lois T. Murray is located now, is that going to be a closed building?
We're going to be surplusing it, yes.
Surplusing that building, okay.
All right, this is level 1. The main entry is at the kind of that crux where that wing comes off, and then at the bottom there. So when you enter, there's the community space on the right, but there's also kind of the main admin area where you would check in if you're a visitor. That's the main entry for Walter P. Carter. The wing that kind of comes down to the lower left, that's the Lois T. Murray area, and so their main entry is right there in the front as well. We want to make sure that there wasn't any feeling of secondary entries for these co-located schools. The academic spaces are the lime green, and then I'm looking at the Lois T. Murray area. The academic spaces are lime green. The support spaces in the center are that yellow, and then music and art are the dark green. Walter P. Carter spaces that in the upper right-hand corner, that's their academic wing. Those are our younger kids. Collaboration and support spaces are in the center as well in that orange. If you continue down, that light blue is the Walter P. Carter gym. And then if you look where that teal is in the center portion, that's a Walter P. Carter dining. Because again, we have the one kitchen serving both programs. So Lois T. Murray has a dining and Walter P. Carter has a dining.
So my main question, and sort of ask it one way now, and then when we get to the recommendation. So, sorry to have to ask this. So we're taking away a rec center and a pool, and in return, they're getting that little tiny purple community space?
That is the proposed recommendation, that they would share that community space with the school. So I think the school is now a community school with the Y of Central Maryland, so they would share a portion of those shared spaces, that community space, the gym, the cafeteria, the media center, and other resource spaces in collaboration with the school and the Y of Central Maryland.
And do you want to talk about the site real quick? Or do you want me to talk about that?
And we needed to tear down the rec center.
In order to double the size of the school program, the recreation center could not remain on the property. We did earlier on explore other options that retain, or at least one option that retained the rec center, and multiple options, I want to say 5 or 6 that retained the swimming pool. But in order to get Lois T all onto one level, maintaining the swimming pool was not feasible. To achieve the program, maintaining the rec center was not feasible. We did hear from Recreation and Parks that neither the pool or the rec center are in good condition. So we have a memo from Recreation and Parks that says the foundation of the rec center is not structurally sound, that there are cracks and other things in the rec center that if you left it alone at some point probably would not continue to operate as a recreation center.
So if I live in this community, am I going to be able to play basketball when I want to?
I hesitate to say a firm yes. I think let me use Fort Worth as an example because I think it's probably closer to a real life one. I was going into the MOU that we had with Recreation and Parks for 21st Century Schools. I was concerned that we were going to have more scheduling challenges, and so telling a community, yes, you're going to have access to the school building whenever you want. I never said that. I said that we're going to do the best we can, and I think there are going to be some scheduling challenges. I was surprised with Fort Worthington that we didn't run into as many scheduling challenges as I thought we were going to. So the way Fort Worthington is structured, Recreation and Parks has access to the non-academic side of the building, while YF Central Maryland is using the academic wing. So they're using the classrooms, collaborative space, while Rex and Parks has complete access to the non-academic spaces. There are some instances, I think there's a window of a 30-minute overlap where we still need to work out. Recreation and Parks does have access to the elementary science lab, which just happened to be outside of the academic wing. So I say that to say we were able to work out, I would say, to probably about 97% flexibility for Recreation and Parks in the Fort Worthington building. Our goal will be similar here.
So we're going to have an MOU, or we do?
We have an MOU. It has to be amended to include Walter P. Carter. Walter P. Carter was not originally included in the MOU because in 2012 or 2013, Baltimore City Recreation and Parks closed the Walter P. Carter Recreation Center. The school took it over, and so for a while, the principal, out of her school budget, hired a rec director and was running the rec program for about 2-3 years. And so up until recently, Recreation Parks was not running recreation program at this school.
So
or at
this
this
is one, when they
facility.
did that master recreation center plan a couple years ago, this is one that they let go.
Correct. And it wasn't until, I want to say 2015, that they started expressing interest in it. So when we did the original MOU, Walter B. Carter was not included.
Okay.
Because it was not a program they were running and operating.
So I should know this too, apologize. So it's a master MOU, it's not site by site?
It is a master MOU that includes several schools within 21st Century, and then there's an individual licensing agreement for each school to speak to unique needs in the space and the structures of those schools and the distinct partners. So there's a master agreement that governs the Frederick, Fort Worthington, what will be Walter B. Carter, John Nicker Howard, Northwood, and then there's an individual licensing agreement for Fort Worthington, an individual licensing agreement for Frederick,
Okay.
and an individual licensing agreement for what will be Walter B. Carter.
So with my school system hat on, or school board hat, whatever you call it, the plans are trying to maximize educational use, be fiscally responsible, get us down to appropriate square footage. So that feels like it works. With my citizen hat on, I really hope that when we're working on these, I'm assuming this, I'm actually not saying I think you're doing differently, but that we are really approaching as open as we can be to preserving as much ability for the communities to have these spaces as possible. It's hard to, we don't want this to be kind of the underbelly, the negative underbelly of the 21st century school plan, is that these communities that don't always have stuff. Now, this is a complicated one because this is a thing that was already had been surplus by the rec and parks, or they weren't running it. It's not in good condition anyway, so it's not as simple as it seems on paper. But I just hope our mindset going into these, when we're doing the MOU, when we've done the MOU, is that we really want to be citizens of the city and see these in the context of these communities. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I would add a couple things. I think when we were first doing this, losing the rec center was certainly a challenge, and I'm not saying that it's no longer a challenge. I do think somewhere in the process, people started accepting, okay, we will have space in the school building. When we went back almost a year later, after having to rework the lowest T site to ensure that it was on one floor, going back to say the swimming pool would not be included, it sparked that emotion again around the rec center. I think they had started accepting it and were willing to work with us toward including that space in the school building. Now that we're back, I think we're starting over again. And there's certainly some lessons that I have learned or we've learned from Fort Worthington. And so can we do things like remove, instead of including the family resource room, which is probably not going to be used as often, to increase the flexibility of the space that recreation and parks would have access to increase some portion of the square footage. I think those are the things that we're looking at.
Is that
As well
still
as-
possible here?
Yes, as well as I am proposing or propose to hold 3 to 4 meetings with the community and let them begin to design that community space, how it should be shaped, what should be included, and then to tour Fort Worthington once we get up and running, so they get a sense of how it's operating at Fort Worthington, and then we need to work through any of the challenges that we have there to continue to use as lessons learned for future schools.
First century, in the essence of interest of time, I wanted to just point out specifically to your point, this particular feasibility study, we did 10 options for this feasibility study. We've only done 3 to 4 for every other feasibility study to address exactly what your concerns are. It's taken us longer to do this particular project than any of the other projects in the portfolio, specifically because we took a lot of time trying to figure out how to best support the community and the areas that were important for the community. The issue of the pool came about actually at the end of the feasibility study project process, because no one really investigated the fact that the pool was structurally unsound as well, and that the school district was helping to pay for it being open for 5 weeks a year just to maintain the community's requirement. So there is going to be some commitment that we've got to help facilitate with the city on how to replace those amenities.
And that's I think being part of that team that works with people to address these needs post-building opening is a good thing. Yes.
So the initial response on this is going to be, no, we can't, because we never have. But something to consider is this is within the Morgan Mile, and so we have federal and state resources to help support community development out of Morgan. We also have a need for significantly improved recreation facilities on Morgan's campus or in proximity to Morgan's campus, which the current Lowest T building sits adjacent to our new softball fields. It may be very worth our time and resources to look at building a community recreation center run by Morgan faculty, students, have community space as a way to hit all of these markers. And I know there's going to be other MOUs and a huge big process, but it doesn't mean it's not worth investigating or looking into, because it would definitely be a value add to that community and that campus.
We're on board.
Yeah, we'll take another question from Andy, and then because they have to get to someplace.
Yep.
I just wanted to ask, on the slide that shows the floor plan and the uses, you're showing 3 music rooms.
So there's a music room for Lois T. Murray, and then part of our prototypes, it's 2 music rooms for our pre-K to 8s. It's an instrumental and a choral.
Thanks.
My question on this space goes back to my prior comment about the 2 schools and the co-location. Knowing that according to compliance on IEPs, almost every single student at Lois T. Murray is going to have adapted physical education, either direct services or consult supports, and the gym here says it's for Walter P. Carter.
There's a gym space for Lois T. Murray. If you see the light blue space there, they also have an additional space that we've added in based on their current program. It's called a
Little
treatment
itty
space.
bitty teeny tiny space?
I forget what square footage it is, but they also have a space called treatment room, and that's, I think, about like 800 square feet, and they'll be using that for OTPT as well.
Right, so but they can't use that for large group physical activities, for allied sports competitions, for those kinds of pieces, unless they're allowed access to the Walter P. Carter. Again, if it was one school, it would be our gym spaces.
I think perhaps then, like, for those types of events, absolutely, there would be discussion between the principals to coordinate the use by LTM.
And for fiscal responsibility, if we only had one principal, because it was one school, we would also be saving revenue there. Thanks.
Do we want to discuss the first floor further, or go on to the second one? All right. So on the second floor, we have, I think it's grades 3 through 5 in the upper right-hand corner, along with art and some other resource classes. In the lower left-hand corner, you have your middle grades. So similar to other 21st century schools, we're trying to maintain a separation between the elementary side and the middle side. And in both of those, you have support spaces and collaboration areas in the central portion. And then the media center is in that center area there, near the elevator. Here's some elevations. Here's a axon of you looking down. So if you look to the left, that's going to be the bus loop drop-off, where that the oval circle, the green oval circle is. If you continue from there, that's going to be the LTM entry, and then continuing the other way is the Walter P. Carter entry. So again, they're right there in the front, visibility from the street for both schools. And then proposed play areas off to the right, but again, that's going to need to be sorted out in terms of what goes on the site. Just the rear view, and again, I want to remind you, again, the dramatic topography on this site, which again was one of the reasons why we ended up pushing the building closer to the center portion of the site, because when we tried maintaining the rec center and the pool, we were getting a building that it didn't have a lot of natural daylight, and we wouldn't do a 21st century school with no windows. Keep going. Okay, here's just a zoomed in version of that front area. Drop off for LTM to the left. Walter P. Carter is continue forward, and then that community space that we're proposing for Walter P. Carter is that white block on the right. And that's it.
Thanks. I think some of the issues that Commissioner Hassan is raising aren't the 21st century teams to address, but I think it's sort of a broader question, so.
Yes, and with all respect and apologies to you all, it's just this is the only place that we talk about buildings and structures and where rooms are, so things like showers and washing machines come up here, even though they're much more related to academic needs of students with disabilities.
Thanks.
We'll move forward to talking about the policy issues with academics, ed planning, and your notes taken.
Good, thank you. And thanks for your thoughtful work on the community issues. I know we'll hear more about this from people when these come up, but I think from this committee standpoint, we'll support the recommendation to the full board.
Great.
Thanks. So let's return to the original order of the budget. So we'll go back to the top, the original top for the FY19 preliminary budget milestone calendar.
Good morning, John Walker, interim CFO.
Coordinate as the Bay Performance Management Strategist.
And we'll be brief because there's really no presentation here. What our idea was is we wanted to be able to share the calendar with the committee and then to later share the calendar with the board to elicit any feedback. This is a preliminary calendar and it's still subject to change. However, I will point out a couple things that we're looking at. We don't expect the fiscal year 19 budget cycle to be quite as dramatic as the fiscal year 18 budget cycle was. I think we took care of a lot of those things in fiscal year 18. What we're doing in this preliminary calendar is we've pushed back our projected date for approval by the board by about a month. I'd really like to pull it back more than that, but I want to manage expectations, see how things go, and then if we get to the point where we can push it back a little further, we could potentially try to do that. But we certainly want to push it back by about a month. That facilitates the hiring of staff for the fiscal year 19 school year. The two challenges that I'll just throw in that we have this year, or the two new things that we have this year, is, as you know, we're working on a new school funding model, which will be part of the process for fiscal year 19. And we're also, we want to align, or we will align our budget with the blueprint work. So they are two things that we are looking forward to do for fiscal year 2019. And that's really all I have.
It's great. I'm really glad it'll be less dramatic. Less dramatic would be great. And the one thing that we heard a lot last year, probably because of all the drama, was from school communities about how little time they had from when they would get something to when they were asked for turnaround. It would be terrific not to hear that this year.
Yes, that's the plan.
Great. That would be a good plan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We probably want to take a look at when we have, there should be a budget forum.
Yeah, we know that the budget forms haven't been put in yet. This is preliminary. These are more or less the mechanical things. We need to work
Okay.
to get those put in at the right place.
So we got a
Yeah,
public.
but we are aware
There's a
that
couple
they're
public
not-
sessions in there. Yeah, okay, got it. We can see the public sessions on the funding model. Anyway, we need the public sessions on the model, the budget, and the board forum on the
Yes.
budget as well.
Yes,
Okay, good.
thank you.
Good question, AJ, thanks. Blackboard Learn. This is the kind of thing when I see.
Good morning,
Morning,
Commissioners.
Chairman.
Sasha, IT Director.
Good morning, Michael Smith, IT Manager.
So one of the key initiatives we have done during this last summer was upgrading our learning management system, or the Blackboard environment. So I think we go to
Next slide.
So the first question we need to answer is, why did we upgrade our existing learning management system with the Blackboard? So the environment, the infrastructure, what we had was pretty antiquated. The hardware was pretty old. The software was several versions behind. So users had issues, our teachers, our students had issues navigating through the platform. So there were several issues. So we said, okay, let's upgrade our current environment to the latest and greatest, but also move that into the cloud environment where we can offer 99.9% uptime. Along with that, there were several features and functionalities which we have delivered. So we're going to focus on them as we go through the presentation.
One thing I wanted to hopefully you can touch on,
Sure.
we heard a presentation from a couple people at the last meeting, I think, Ken, you were part of it, and where we were moving to, all classrooms were going to have Wi-Fi. I mean, it was like the great upgrade. So when I saw, my main question for this presentation is, what's the relationship between that presentation and this presentation? Because when I looked at this, I thought we just heard about all this, and this feels like certainly related, but as a non-technology person, I really can't tell what the relationship is.
Good morning,
If somebody could
Commissioners.
help out with that, that would be great.
Absolutely. The Wi-Fi presentation that you received several weeks ago was the, if you will, think of it as your highway. This is an application, or this is a car, or this is an automobile, or a tool that's going to travel on that highway. The Wi-Fi is putting that accessibility in all of our schools. And that was, we started that this summer, and I think we brought up 18 schools this summer, so moving well towards that. But this is a tool. The Blackboard is a component, instructional component, that's going to ride on that highway.
Will this allow single sign-in with the other highways that are out there?
Mike will talk about that, but yes, indeed. The single sign-on is component. I think we're down to now 2 credentials for the district. But yes, ma'am, he will talk about that as well.
And again,
New system, which is a new student information system. This summer, we upgraded our learning management system. It's a continuous improvement process to make sure our students and the teachers have the latest and greatest technologies and tools so that they can, use them. Right, Mike?
Get to the why. I'm not familiar with what Blackboard is. Could you just explain what that is, please?
So our Blackboard system is a learning management system that's built on the Blackboard platform and enables anytime, anywhere learning. We use it in our district for a multitude of reasons. We use it for professional development opportunities. We also use it for job-embedded trainings. We use it for document repository, blended learning, and application support. If many of you may be familiar with this slide, in which many of our teachers and staff members go to for an array of, again, support and trainings that sort of, again, support the district. To name a few, the SLO, as well as Infinite Campus training. Sasha had spoke to that upgrade from last year, so we were able to build a training module that supported the Infinite Campus rollout. And we were also able to track all of the participants that have gone through those different training modules. And we do this quite often with many of different business stakeholders throughout the district. In addition to that, as you'll see when we go live to the actual application, this is also, if we look at it from the perspective, we serve a business, the business entity of city schools, as well as the K-12 side as well. So we have a number of teachers and students that engage with this application because it truly is just that. It's a learning management system that's used widely across the world, I should say. So the core of this upgrade was Blackboard Learn, which is, again, the learning management system. And also with this upgrade was the mobile component. It is completely mobile. So the experience that you users have from the computer or your traditional mode of leveraging a learning management system can also be leveraged on a mobile device. It is completely responsive design, such that if you're using a tablet or any type of device, it will respond accordingly, so you don't have to do the pinching and scrolling. Another component of this upgrade was Collaborate, which is like a Webex tool, and it's native to each Blackboard course experience, but we also have it as a standalone. It is SIS and SSO compliant, such that Sasha had mentioned that we upgraded our Infinite Campus last year. Well, it's integrated with our Infinite Campus system, so we get rostering directly from Infinite Campus, and we did push out an icon to the desktops of all the machines in the fleet, such that we do have single sign-on. And one of the other important components of this is that it's off-site hosting. In the past, we had, because it was hosted in our data center down in the basement, it had to be manned by, obviously, personnel here on site, but by it being hosted in the cloud, so to speak, we are assured a 99.9% uptime. So we actually had a pilot in which we had several users and use cases in the district. We had personnel from some of our high schools, as well as I'm proud to say one of my former students who is now the teacher at NACA. She leveraged it with her students. We had Wendy Barnes, who leveraged it with a UDL, which was an AU bearing course that she provided for adults in the district. And we had some pretty positive feedback. We had some feedback that was actually, along the lines of, I wish it had. And the beautiful thing about this environment is that it's in a hosted environment, and it's cloud hosted such that we're on a continuous release cycle. One of the challenges that we had by being locally hosted is that we had to shut the system and take it down for a significant amount of time in order to upgrade. And in addition to the fact that with our locally hosted environment, the equipment was, again, as Sasha alluded to, was outdated, so it really prevented us from updating in our local environment. But being in a cloud-hosted environment, we're on a continuous release cycle, and we can upgrade without having the system be taken offline for a significant amount of time. So what I'd like to do at this point and everything is just to take a brief look in a live environment, and so that you can see firsthand some of the things that are going on right now as we speak. So one of the things I wanted to really just highlight is that part of adoption, we solicited some of the schools to actually participate in a banner contest. So this is a banner that was submitted from a student at the Baltimore Design School, Angel Wheeler, and she basically, part of the criteria was they had to design a banner, and they had to write a narrative about their banner, and she did a phenomenal job, and as well as her peers. And so what we're planning to do is to feature all of the students' banners quarterly. So this is Angel, who's up now, and she's, remarkable job. I mean, I thought it was really emblematic of if you just look out the window, you'll see pretty much what is depicted in her banner. At this point, I want Keisha to log in as the staff login. And so that's an example of a single sign-on. Just by selecting that button, she's in. The same would occur if you hit the desktop icon. This page is a familiar page, and it's more, if we would say, part of the business side of things. So these are these job-embedded professional development opportunities like EEO training, password reset, such that if from each school, if they designate a person to be the local password resetter, they would go through this training, and then we're able to track and subsequently automate giving that person the ability to reset passwords at their local school. SLO is another big initiative or application that we worked along with Human Capital and Teaching and Learning. The Infinite Campus training, as Sashi said about the fact that we upgraded this last year. And all of these trainings are, again, present like a faster, cheaper, and more accurate account for people that go through the trainings. We can track these trainings, and we can also generate reports to the business owners. Keisha, I'd like you to select, click here, and she's actually going to transition to the course side of things. And so basically this is a persona-based environment. So what you're seeing is basically based off of my login, and because I'm logged into this computer. And this is called an activity stream. So as a student, I would see this when I came to this page. when students select the login icon, this is what they come to first. Unlike what you just witnessed on the other tab, as adults or staff members, we come to the business side of the house. But here you see sort of like an aggregation of happenings and things that are going on within a student's life as it relates to their classes. So I'm actually, I've injected myself into several classes that are going on in the district, this virtual algebra class, as well as some other classes that are going on, the city schools Blackboard online course, and there are a few others. And so what I like to do is just select, let's say, the virtual algebra.
So I'm in the class, but I can also take the class online?
Yes. So, well, for those teachers, so if you think about this as an extension of your brick and mortar courses. So as a teacher, I can actually either have flipped learning or blended learning, such that those items that I'm teaching face-to-face, I can also extend that learning beyond the brick and mortar buildings. And then
So it's
you
not
have,
instead of, it's in addition to?
no, in addition to, it's actually to complement. So we do not have any fully online courses and everything, but we do have some situations where teachers, again, have flipped learning where they may put up video content or things that students should do before class. Or in addition to that, project-based scenarios in which they can present them via this course delivery system.
And do all algebra teachers have to do this, or is?
No, so this is some
Who's Levi
select.
Straight?
That's a teacher. That's just a sample.
Okay, but, so this is the same virtual algebra class for all teachers, or
No, this happens just to be one teacher that's actually doing this right now.
so they're not required to do it?
No. Okay. And so some other examples, if Keisha, if you could go back. Go to the Blue Chip class, that's actually a course that we taught this summer, and we offered to teachers in the district and to support them in developing their online presence. And so we had several teachers that came through the summer, and we're also offering an online version of this, or a hybrid version, I should say. It is MSDE sanctioned, so we did write this, and they awarded us the ability to provide continuing professional development credits for teachers that go through this program. So this is one that we did this summer, and again, we do have an online version of it as well. As I stated earlier, part of the upgrade is Collaborate, and so every course experience comes baked with a Collaborate experience. So this is sort of like a Webex tool that would allow teachers or students to jump into a Collaborate room. It has a whiteboard. It also has the ability to record each session. So right now, that's one of my colleagues who's actually back at the PDC, and she's presenting this real time. And the fact is, this is something that's native to, again, every course experience, but it can be leveraged as a standalone as well. So you don't necessarily have to go through Blackboard to actually take advantage of this as well.
As a parent, I'm able to log on and see my son's schedule, his grades. Is that through this platform as well?
Not exactly. So Infinite Campus is the parent portal for the district.
Right.
This is, if a parent actually had the students login information, they could certainly log in and see what the child is doing. But when we talk about parent portal, that's something that we defer to as Infinite Campus.
That is your primary depository for grades, assignments, attendance. Infinite Campus, that's the portal you use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Keisha, if you could actually, we're going to transition back to the PowerPoint deck. So as I stated earlier, we had a significant number of teachers and staff members to come through throughout the summer months to engage in some face-to-face training at the Professional Development Center on Northern Parkway. And we're also, on October 23rd, we're going to be launching the hybrid version of the same course, but it's meant to be, I want to say, 90% online. And this would enable teachers to take advantage of this without having to travel to the professional development or any other space. And some of the communication strategies that we leverage to get the word out about this, we included them in the Leadership Action Update, as well as the City Schools Inside. We sent out several email notifications to teachers, as well as very soon we're going to have posters distributed to the schools that will be in English and in Spanish. And we, again, as I stated earlier, we pushed out a desktop icon that should be on the machines, laptops and desktops. And this will actually, again, enable single sign-on into the application. And in terms of the timeline, I mean, we're actually live with this application. We started sometime in February, and our go-live date was the August 8th. So thank you.
Great.
Any questions?
No, we're good. We're good,
All right,
thanks.
thank you.
All right, now we're going to get our transportation update. Where'd Jacinta go? Did she leave? Is Jacinta coming back?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning. John Land, Executive Director of Operations.
Robert Marshall, Data Analyst with the Office of People Transportation.
Marshall, can you just bring that microphone closer to you?
Sure.
And John, when you guys are making this presentation, we get periodic updates on the transportation, and several meetings ago, I don't remember how many now, we learned about the routing study, and there was some things that we learned about things that this department is trying to do to make things more efficient, to save money. People that have offered to help figure out new ways to save money. So sometimes it's hard to see, when we get new presentation like this, to know what happened with those former recommendations. So
Okay.
sometimes I take the time and I go back and find the other old presentations and I look exactly what was recommended. But it would be nice if particularly the transportation, because it's such a high budget line item that we are trying to keep under control. And a lot has been invested, staff time and consultant time, to try to help us figure out more efficiencies. But it was hard to tell from this presentation, how we either were incorporating some of those recommendations or rejected them because they didn't seem feasible. And maybe that burden should be more on me, but it would be helpful to,
Okay.
do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is our annual update on transportation. It's an overview. We'll talk about our ridership and services, our budget, our staffing and organization, the MTA, and some initiatives that we have planned for this school year. Our budget that was approved for FY17 is $37.2 million. We have 101 employees and 9 contractors and 5 taxi cab contractors and the MTA. So a large, 90% of our business that we do or services are contracted. And we have a lot of partners that work with us in the district. The Office of Special Education, Communications, Family and Community Engagement, the Homeless Office, and the Academic Office. So our ridership, we have a number of services: MTA, corner to corner, curb to curb, and what we call swing space. We do extracurricular and special events. The MTA, we have about 28,000 students who are eligible in the district, and eligibility are for students in grades 6 to 12 who live greater than a mile and a half away from their enrolled school or have an unsafe walk. We have corner-to-corner buses, which go to a bus stop, pick up a number of students, go to another stop, pick up a number of students, and go to the school. And that's about 1,800 students. Curb to curb is where most of our work is done. That's students with special needs, homeless students, ESOL students, that these services, the buses or the taxi cabs, go to their home and pick the student up and take them to their school. And that's where we've had a lot of growth in our ridership, 434 students from 2015 to last year. The swing space.
Curb to curb overall or in the taxi cab?
The curb to curb. So the curb to curb will be provided by taxi cabs and yellow buses. Swing space is the bus service that the Maryland Stadium Authority funds for the 21st century schools, and the objective of swing space is to take students from a school that's under renovation or replacement. They're in another school temporarily, and to transport them from their neighborhood to the temporary site. And then when the new school opens, that service will go away, or it may be amended, depending on what services are needed now with a renovated school and other students coming in.
Yeah, I meant to ask this to our 21st century team, but I forgot. But it's a transportation question. Just as an example, on the point you just made about the swing space, just as an example, West Side Elementary and John Eager Howard. So very traumatic for the West Side Elementary school kids and families to close that school, but we work with people and meet with people, and we do the best we can to soften that blow. And the John Eager Howard kids then were transported to the swing space during this construction time. Great. So I'm the I'm the West Side Elementary kids, and now the new school opens in Reservoir Hill, and I'm thinking, when the John Eager Howard kids needed to get to my school, we helped them. Now that we got to get my kids over to the John Eager Howard school, Dorothy Height, they're not helping us anymore. So they took away my school, and now they're not helping me with the transportation. How do we, what's our response to that? Because it could feel like, Keith?
Yes,
Do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. In fact, this is an issue, obviously, that has come up. It's been flagged by 21st Century. We've had a number of parents inquire about it. I've had conversations with Jacinta, and I've also informed the Chief of Staff that we would look into this issue, as well as how enrollment is affected. What I have asked Jacinta to look at is the distance that these students would have to travel that would normally go to West Side Elementary, now going to John Eager Howard, because it's a great distance, and also there are a lot of very difficult roads that would have to be crossed by elementary school students. So the answer that we are looking at right now is what in our normal transportation process and rules and regulations, what could we do that would help in this particular area? So any of those students that live more than a mile from John Eager Howard, we provide transportation for those elementary school students. So that will always be in place. We will also look at any outliers in terms of children, because obviously that area is a difficult area in crime-wise, so we will look to make sure that any elementary school students that would cross in different neighborhoods will not be impacted. So we would provide transportation for them, and of course anyone crossing major thoroughfares like Druid Park Lake Drive would also have to be provided transportation. So
Which is virtually uncrossable.
it's
By any
virtually for
human.
an adult, yes.
Yeah, it's
So
not designed to be crossable.
we understand, it's just that, people want swing space buses to just take everybody. And that's never been our process. We've not done that in other buildings that have been open. We're not going to do it at Fort Worthington or Frederick. So what we want to do is to make sure that everyone is protected based upon the regular rules that we have that apply for transportation. We don't want to make a decision that basically is going to have a ripple effect, and now everyone will want the same type, because
No,
we
I can
don't
see,
have that.
oh, I can definitely see
Right.
that the proverbial both sides of the story. I just, I
Mhm.
think if I'm a West Side kid,
Right.
it does have a look, has a feel of, oh,
So I asked Jacinta to look, we can check with Dr. Stewart's operation to find out where those students live, so that we could look at those things and make determinations about how we're going to provide support to ensure that students get to the schools.
thank you.
So along the, talking about curb-to-curb transportation, this is what we, fiscal 2017 compared to 16 and 15. Our student ridership, you can see the categories of reasons that we transport students, and the growth from 15 to 16 to 17, and then the growth in yellow bus and taxi cab. This is an overview of our budget. I think an important piece to understand is 95.4% of our dollars are spent on district services for students and essential operational services. So this would be, the contract for the MTA, our yellow buses, our taxi cabs, our own fleet that we have, and our own drivers, and then our mechanics that service these vehicles to keep them running, to ensure that that there's no interruptions in service.
So I'm curious. This is FY17 spending, so this is last year, so this is actuals. Looks like we spent 40.3 plus 907. No, 40.3 plus 1.7. Is that right? Is that the number total? So there was the cost for direct transportation was 40.3 million, and then the operational costs, services, et cetera, was 1.7 million.
Right, and that's as of August 2nd, but that doesn't include administrative printing supplies.
So that, my only question, the very first slide said our budget for this, our budget was 37.2.
Yes.
So does that mean we went over budget by 5 million?
No, that was, so that 37.2 is fiscal 18, this is 17.
No, the slide says, on slide 3, it says transportation overview fiscal 2017 budget, 37.2 million.
Okay.
I'm just trying to reconcile those two slides.
Is
Okay,
it possible that the additional budget money came out of special ed services or reimbursements, and so that's why?
The reason for the difference is House Bill 152, that for the MTA, part of the financial recovery was that the city, for this school year, would assume the cost for the MTA, which was probably about $5.5 million.
Okay, so we're,
that was
that was FY17. So it started in FY17?
That, the 37.2 million, I'm sorry, is fiscal, that you see on the slide is for fiscal 2018.
So the
That's
title's
the-
wrong.
The
The
yes.
heading on that page says fiscal 2017,
Yes,
Slide 3.
slide 3.
correct.
So that's supposed to be fiscal 2018.
Yes,
So then I think the chair's challenge is we're budgeting less money than this year.
But,
the reason for the difference is the MTA is now covered by the city.
okay, so we don't show, that's helpful. So I just have to forget that it says 17, and we're talking about the current year. So this is the budget this year, and then the information. So is all the information FY17, or is it 18? Because all the titles have FY17, FY17, FY17. I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing before I ask my question. So slide 3 says FY17, it's supposed to be 18. Is slide 4 17, or is it 18?
17.
So that's 17. So looking forward, the budget's 37.2, so for the year that we're in now, but then the other slides are looking, they're recounting of actuals.
Right, the only exception is that budget is 18. Everything else is 17.
So in the budget of 37.2 million, we, rather than count the money that we're getting from the state, city in the budget and then just showing that as a revenue source, we didn't show it in the budget at all.
Correct.
Because it never shows up as money, it's that they're just paying for it. Is
Correct.
that correct?
Correct.
So if the budget stays about the same, if the FY 2017 spending was roughly 42 million, then we're saying that the services from the city and the state are roughly 5 million.
Correct.
Okay. All right, yeah,
Just
looking ahead.
I would like to add that the one thing that really impacts the budget for transportation is the constant increase in the number of students who are requiring transportation. We are already facing an increase from last year with students requesting transportation. Just in the last month, I think we have like 400 kids or more who are now requesting transportation after school has begun. And this trend will probably continue through the entire year. I remember last year in May, we were getting a couple of hundred students who were now saying that they were homeless and needed transportation. These numbers are going to continue to grow each month, and they impact our budget. We are given a very tight budget with very little flexibility, but the budget can and most likely will be exceeded simply because all we do is provide transportation. We don't decide who gets it. That's decided by the homeless office, by special education, by ESOL office. They all put into the student transportation system who should be transported, and special ed will decide in the IEPs what type of transportation that will be, whether it will be curb to curb, which is the most expensive and which really takes up the bulk of our money, or whether it will be corner to corner. So all of those factors affect what the budget's going to be. And I think that should be understood.
No, that's very helpful. Commissioner Frank?
Yeah, that is, I'm looking at slide 5, and it looks like over the last 3 fiscal years, we've increased by 400 students. And I'm curious, the way you put it, you're basically given a number. You're not in a position to challenge anything. You accept what you receive. I would even ask my fellow board members, is there a process to ensure that the rights of our students to receive this service is in fact sort of earned? How is it determined? Is it all on an individual basis, the 5,900 kids, or I'm sorry, yeah, almost 6,000 kids? Someone in the district is determining in each case that they should receive curb to curb? And generally, Martha, how is that determined? You know?
Well, with students with IEPs, it's part of their due process and their compliance for their IEP process. And Steve, if you want to answer, but homeless students have to, they verify that they are homeless, have to declare it as families. Similar with students on a 504. Suspensions, I think that may be probably the only one that's not really locked down solid, and that's because we're reviewing what happens when a student is suspended, where they're expected to be, where they're not allowed to be.
What about foster care? That's a curious one to me.
Is it temporary or permanent foster care?
It's from 0
Just
to
center
37.
use.
Is that, sorry?
It is permanent. So foster care is also evaluated similar to homeless, but right now, as of this fiscal year, if a student is classified needing transportation services as a result of foster care as a reason, then they are locked into that for the duration, which means they could have a permanent placement next year, but because they was once in the foster care, we would still be, as a district, obligated to provide transportation for that student.
That is interesting. This is the wrong group to ask. You're basically saying that you make sure that when kids enter your system, that you transport them.
Yes.
So we'll flag that as a question. For anybody listening or for the public record, we're not questioning whether foster kids deserve transportation. That is so not the
Right.
question. But I think we're just really trying to understand what the process is where there's not legal mandates, how one decides that. Because on the surface, it's not obvious, but we're not questioning the integrity of the staff and deciding. So let's just let it go right now and flag it as a follow-up
And
question.
I would also like to add, the past 2 fiscal years, we've also had an increased number of students that we're transporting because of the witness protection program evolving, around the crimes in the city. So that's also a growing number of students that we transport, basically at the request of legal.
And I would like to add that about 5 years ago, after a number of concerns in terms of the growing numbers of students we were receiving, we created a position and hired someone particularly to work with special education because we felt that the numbers of IEP students were rising at an incredibly fast rate, and we wanted someone to really scrub those names that we were receiving to make sure that their IEPs were correct and that they did require transportation. So we've gotten someone now who is really excellent and working with Jacinta from that standpoint. We've always had a liaison with special ed, but they didn't have the certification to really challenge anything in special ed. So I wanted to hire someone with that certification. We have that individual on board, and she does go to IEP meetings. She does challenge if she feels that a child or a student should not receive a specific type of transportation. And that is absolutely essential because sometimes parents are very boisterous and they're very determined to get what they want, and they just get it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
we
the
do
essence
what
of-
we can to ensure that everyone is legitimate who receives transportation. So it's not just
Got it.
you send it to us and we'll pick them up.
Got it.
So one point really quickly on that, and again, beyond the scope of this meeting, but to get it on the record, especially our kids with 504s that are, maybe have a bus aid in addition to temporary or full-time transportation, what is our academic support to teaching them appropriate bus behaviors, to being able to facilitate their reduction in service need? And that's outside of the scope of your office, but I think a great place for partnership with your special ed liaisons, as well as with academics. The other question is just, I don't know if this presentation will go to anyone else, but again, back to slide 3 with the 37.2 million. If I'm the city or the state, now I think that, I'm kicking in 5 million, so then your cost out of your budget is only 32. So I just to highlight that, especially as you go to present to city, the actual costs and then the budgeted amount or allocated from city schools, just so that no one comes back at us later and says, well, we overpaid you or over allocated and you're under budgeting. And then we also don't, when that funding stops, all of a sudden our budget goes from 37 to 52 because we've added 400 children every year, and now there's conversation about misappropriation of resources along the way.
Okay.
All right, we have about 15 minutes left, and we have a couple of other items, so we'll try to hold some questions down and let you get through the presentation.
So this is our staffing and organization. We have some fundamental functions that we need in our organization. That's routing and bus operations and customer service. So the routing, we have a team of 4 routers who developed our routes for the start of school and, manage the changes, manage the 400 students that have come in after school, all the address changes to get them onto yellow bus. The ones we struggle with, we put on taxi cab. Jacinta can talk about some of the initiatives that we implemented from the routing study.
So from the routing study, we changed the distribution of the routes in order to increase the efficiency of our staff. So now we only update twice a week versus every day to allow the school enough time to make the transition as well as the transportation companies. We also attempted for ESY to route based in for 30 minutes rather than 90 minutes. We had to defer back to 90 minutes because of the lack of resources, meaning buses and bus drivers. That's our biggest two changes from the routing study. Right, so we would send them out daily, and it would cause confusion for the contractors as well as the schools. So now we send out on Tuesday with effective changes to take place on Thursday, and we send out on Thursday with effective changes to take place on the following Tuesday. So that will start October the 1st, because we just this week we've received about 900 additional requests from the first day. So we are still catching up to get everybody routed. We did move our target dates twice. Robin Marshall is our data analyst, so he's tracking numbers every day. So we are about, like I say, 900 students more than the first day that we started. So we're down to about 450 kids still need routes. So once we get, hopefully by that last week of September, we will be more steady, and the change of the updates will begin October the 1st. But it's been communicated to the schools and our partners that's our new operational process for transportation for this year going forward.
I would like to add that part of what Jacinta's talking about is the daily number of adds, deletes that they face every day from students who are changing addresses and moving to different parts of the city. And it really wreaks havoc on your transportation system, because you may have a student who was on this bus, and then the next week you have to put him on another bus, and then he's moved again. So it really wreaks havoc on us in terms of efficiency in trying to do that. So every day we're faced with maybe 30 to 50 changes every day in terms of transportation. So it's gotten to be too dramatic for schools as well as the staff, so that's why they're limited now just to 2 days a week to try to get a hold on what's to happen. Instead of the the transportation beginning the next day, give you 2 days to try to make sure that the bus companies can adjust as well as the schools.
So let's, I don't think we have to go through the detail on this page. I'm concerned that we're not going to get to the CIP, and we need to. But I appreciate the update on what you took from how you used the routing study, what you could and what you couldn't use. That's helpful.
Okay.
And we have our safety, our staffing, our training and certification office. This team goes through all our driver files and paperwork to validate that they're certified. Then we have our fleet maintenance. You can see that record there of our inspections. Then I think another important piece is the MTA. We negotiated with MTA this past school year. House Bill 152 definitely helped, and a lot of our partners have helped as well. So our students this year can travel from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m., so that's an increase of 2 hours. And they can travel 4 times a day for 120 minutes each time. So they have 8 hours of travel that they can use the MTA for after-school activities, as well as getting to school, getting home, getting to a job, and getting home. So that's very helpful. Then this year, we're going to, you all approved the GPS contract. We're going to implement a GPS system into all of our yellow buses. And that's it. And there's some appendix you can look at.
Simply, the Baltimore link, was it as big of a disaster as people projected, or kids basically did okay, or you couldn't really tell? Just kind of like, simply like, how did it go?
I think as far as it wasn't a meltdown, I think
I guess that's a good standard to have.
It was, I think it was pretty successful in the respect that students knew, how to access their new route, how to get to school. There was a lot of outreach by MTA, extensive outreach, and I have to thank them for that publicly. They really stepped up. We interfaced with students and schools and staff with MTA. We brought in a lot of partners, the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, Brian O'Malley, Burke, came in and helped us with a lot of data analysis.
I know there was a group towards the end, Avis Ransom, and
Yes.
you guys worked well with them, too.
Yes.
That
And
was
that's, the big question was, do our kids know how to get to school? So the first day I was at Patterson Park, 15, it all comes down to 15 minutes, and, the buses showed up, they were full, kids getting off, they were on time for school. To me, that was a good sign. We still have the operational concerns, the length of ride, the number of transfers, which we had before Baltimore Link, but I think it went well.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Mhm.
All right, CIP. Everybody's favorite subject.
So, good morning, Commissioners. In the interest of time, I'll try to move through this quickly. My name is Nicole Stewart, Director of Facilities Planning.
And I'm Cindy Smith, Director of Design and Construction.
There we go. All right, so as you all know, City Schools submits a secure plan every year to the IEC outlining our priority capital funding projects. And I won't go too much further into that since we are all aware of what this is. And then today, Cindy will go over an overview of our previous CIP projects. I'll talk about some of the key goals for FY19 CIP. I'll go through the actual request, and I'll talk a little bit about the relationship between that and the upcoming discussion around the state cost share formula. And then I'll also talk about the relationship between the FY19 request and the reserve contingency funding.
So in regards to previous ones, I won't go through all the numbers since we're trying to get through this, but you can see here that we have a variety of both 18, 17, and 16 year projects that we're trying to, both complete and start design and everything on. In general, the FY18 projects were in the starting of design. 17 projects are in the midst of some stage of design for the most part, and 16s are all in construction except for some last few that we used some contingency funds for, so they are actually in the midst of their design at the moment. So, pretty much everything in construction where it needs to be and design where it needs to be. In regards to the major projects, Holabird and Graceland, which we've all talked about numerous times, so we won't get into much detail. The current schedule is building occupancy in August of 2019. That puts construction, our current estimate for construction start is roughly this December. We had some issues with our bid the first time around, so it's out for rebid at the moment, with bids due on the Thursday a week from this week, so the 28th. Whatever that is, next Thursday. So, our intent then would be to have an award hopefully by December so that the contractor can at least start with the new portables.
So the key goals for the FY19 CIP request, one is to request funds for what will be the majority of the balance for the major projects. So for Halliburton, the state funding is about $26 million. We previously received about 10, and this year we'll be requesting $13 million for this project. And then for Graceland, the state shares $21 million. We previously received 9, and then we're requesting this year. We previously received 9 for Graceland, and this year we're requesting 10. So altogether, the request for those two major projects is $23 million, and as you are aware, our usual allocation is about $36 to $37 million.
I don't think I realized that we were still collecting money for those two projects. I thought we had hit the total last year. I just totally was remembering that wrong.
right? And so
Yeah,
that's important to remember for how the rest of the request is structured. In addition, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, we had this conversation last year about the impact of the state partially funding our projects. So we have 3 HVAC projects that were originally funded in FY16. We received another allocation in FY17, and then another allocation in FY18. Well, of course, over 3 years, the original cost for those projects increased by the time we went to bid, and so we actually had to rescind those projects because we didn't receive the last portion of state funds until 3 years after the original cost estimates for these projects. And so I'll get into a little bit about that later. And then, of course, in order to implement our 5-year air conditioning plan, we are adding 12 AC projects to the FY19 request with the understanding that they will be funded with contingency funds. And then in the interest of consistency, so we had very many projects in the FY18 request that weren't funded. If you recall, the majority of our allocation went to, again, partially funded projects, so we didn't have very many new projects last year. So we essentially moved up the new projects, the projects last year that didn't get funded, we moved the priorities up for this year.
If I could just add one small thing. When she talks about contingency dollars, she also mentioned we reverted a number of projects because over a 3-year period, once we got through the final year, the cost of the project was more. So when we reverted those projects, that money, and last year I believe it was $30 million.
We'll get to it.
Goes to a special account, and that becomes our contingency account from which we have now requested money for.
And I thought I had recalled from last year that we wanted them to let us use that for air conditioning projects, and I thought that they said yes, but now you're saying they said yes, but we still couldn't do it because once we went out to do it, the market changed?
So there's a difference between, so the air conditioning project are the split window AC units.
Different from HVAC, Cheryl.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Okay.
Because we're short on time, not now, but could you just provide a slide of the sources of funds that make up the capital ask for 19?
Yeah, it's going to be on a coming slide.
I didn't see it.
So
At one
there.
point,
It's on it, you'll see it.
did we not have a community partner that was
Well, she
interested
said
in setting up
37
a
million.
fund
That's what
to
we're gonna ask for, that's
use
what we end up
to
getting.
sort of fill the gap
We asked
so that we didn't have so many projects that got
Get
rescinded?
17 every
Is
year.
that still in process or?
Well, we're not involved with those discussions. We would have to consult with the chief of staff who's been doing that.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
And so this is the total request, $74 million from the state, 17 from the city. It's important to note that these amounts are based on the current state cost share, which is 93% contribution from the state on our CIP projects and 7% from the city. Every 3 years, the IEC is required to recommend to the BPW changes to that state cost share formula, and so FY19 is the year that that will change. So in August, we were alerted that the IEC had calculated the updated state cost share and was moving forward to vote on it, which we hadn't actually seen it yet. And so the change would be from 93% of the state funding to in FY19, 88%, and then in 21, 87%.
What is the difference between you said $37 million and this $91 million?
So this $91 million, so I'm not sure if a 1 or 2.4 was included in the uploads, but we are requesting about 34 projects that total $74 million. That's the state share, and then $17 million would be what we get annually from the city. But our actual allocation only averages about $36 to $37 million from the state. So that's what we're requesting, but we realize that we probably won't get too far down our priority list because we generally only receive 36 or 37 million.
Thanks.
And so just a little bit more on this state and local cost share formula. So after we were alerted of this change, that resulted in some conversations between us and the IEC as well as MSDE, which is the agency that assists them in the calculations for the state cost share. And so just very briefly, our position on that is that, as you are aware, the General Assembly voted last year to make some changes to how TIFs were counted in state funding. In addition, as you're aware, the Kerwin Commission is also making some changes to state funding. So our position is that any change to the state and local cost share should wait until these two things have been resolved. But then if they are to move forward with making a change, our ask is that the city schools issue debt be included in the formula. So currently it is not. So we have $127 million in city schools issued debt that currently isn't included in the formula. So as we understand it, that requires a change in COMAR language. And so we presented at the IEC last week and testified and advocated for ourselves so that the IEC members would assist us in changing that COMAR language to allow our $127 million in city schools issued debt to be included in the calculations, which would mean that we would likely not take such a big hit in the decrease in the state cost share.
So my bottom line question is this a done deal? Like when will we know? This is what they're recommending. Like, when will we know?
So last week, when we attended the IAC member meeting, they were initially going to vote on the issue then, but I think, based on our advocacy, they made a decision to wait. And so they are investigating some other elements in order for them to make a decision for how to move forward.
Were we the only people testifying?
Yes.
Nobody else was concerned about the reduction in cost share?
Well, we believe no one else is as affected as we are.
I believe that. That's given how much more the locals put in.
And I would also add that I don't believe that anyone had a representative like we did. Tawana basically found out about this and called us to alert us. And so that's why we were up in arms. We were questioning them on the calculations. What did they do in their calculations that determined that we were to lose so much in the state cost share? So I don't think any of the other jurisdictions were even up on that. And so they really weren't complaining. But usually this just goes by and the state votes on it and it's approved. But this time, we put sort of like a kink in the armor there. Okay. And so that's why this has become an issue.
And important to remember also, City Schools is the only LEA that is able to issue its own debt. So we are the only district that's even affected by this COMAR language, which doesn't account for the fact that we do issue our own debt. So the other counties, their calculation actually reflects their financial position, whereas ours does not.
AJ, tell them.
I did. Okay. Also, Frederick County sent a letter to the board that I don't know if you remember, I shared it with you. And they sent a letter to the IAC, but I don't think they testified.
I would add that they sent a letter only because after we contested the calculation, the IAC started calling around to other jurisdictions to see if they were concerned. And the issue of the debt calculation, nobody else is affected but us, and we determined or we realized that we were really adversely affected because of the way they did the calculations and did not include the school-issued debt.
Just what is being voted on at the IAC, does that include the TIF issue, or is that now settled legislatively, at least for now?
So as I understand it, House Bill 285 did recommend that there be some thought around how TIF is counted towards state funding, but not within
this
yes.
testimony. Okay.
Exactly.
I thought that the TIF thing was done for 2 years, last year and then this coming year.
So as I understand it, while that may be the case, it has
affect
not
this.
affected this.
Okay.
And also briefly important to note, In the last update for the state cost share, we were originally at 97%, and then we went down to 93%, and then we will be going down to 87% in FY 20 and 21, which is a 10 percentage point decrease.
Which is what they're recommending
Yes,
before you showed up.
yes. And then this is just an example of the impact of that state cost share change. And so this goes back to the projects that we had to rescind, which were partially funded over 3 years. And so in the first column is the original estimate that we received in 2014. And then when we went out to bid these 3 HVAC projects in 2017, once we received the balance of the funds, there was an increase of about $3 million in the cost of these projects. And so what we have to do now is, so we had to rescind the projects, and now we have to resubmit them as a part of FY19. And this table illustrates what the impact of the change of the state cost share would be based on the proposed changes from the IEC, which we would basically lose about $1 million in funding, and state funding for these projects, which we would have to make up with local funds. And I just wanted to remind everyone that of how we use our local funds. So $1 million may not sound like a lot of money, but because we spend our local allocation on so many things, it's a huge impact for our city schools. And then the reserve contingency funds, as Keith mentioned, we had to rescind projects last year in the amount of $31 million. And so even though we expect for the FY19, since we only received $36 million, we expect to be able to fund the 2 major projects, which are $23 million, and then those 3 HVAC projects that have already been designed, those are about 12. So that is really going to be our full allocation for FY19. So we really need the reserve contingency funds to fund other systemic projects that we feel we can move forward. And so we've been rather aggressive in making sure that we make this request of the state so that we receive our $31 million in contingency funds. And then what we intend to do with that money, we will be funding 4 projects that were previously rescinded due to contract issues. As I mentioned, our 12 AC projects will be funded with contingency, and then we would move forward 6 CIP projects that were reviewed last year, but we didn't have enough money to for them to be funded, and then 2 projects that from last year that were partially funded. We are requesting the balance for those projects with these contingency funds. And so just so that you're all aware, the timeline was changed a little bit this year, so the governor recommended that he meet with the LEAs earlier than normal. So the meeting is scheduled for October 18th at the BPW. We present our case for our FY19 request, and then the actual funding timeline will be the same, where we will receive 75% in January, about 90% in the spring, and then the full allocation in May. It's just a summary slide. Any questions?
Any more questions? When do you think you'll know about the cost share? Before October 18th?
Probably not. So when we last spoke to the IEC, so our city schools issued debt comes from qualified school construction bonds that were issued in 2009 and 2011. So the IEC stated that they believe that other districts also have those kinds of bonds, so they wanted to do a little bit more research. But we do know that when a vote moves forward, there are a couple of ways that we will be able to advocate for changes to the COMAR language to include our city schools issued debt. So there's a regulatory process that follows the vote, and I think there are a couple opportunities for us to request that change to be made.
I think the IAC was hoping that they would vote on this issue now because it is supposed to be voted on by October, but their next meeting now is not until November, so we're hoping. We would like to have it resolved by then, but we are just making sure that we get to voice our concerns as we did last week, which was an incredible meeting for Baltimore City, given the way we've normally experienced things down at the IAC.
Incredible in that.
Very positive.
Good.
Good. What Nicole didn't say was the state project manager who read a report on our contingency requests. Normally, they take our contingency money and they actually use it as a part of our CIP allocation. So this time, we have asked early for that money.
So our likely receipt of 30 to 37, plus the 31 contingency.
Yes. So he indicated that they asked us for the information just prior to the holiday. They received the information and that it was very thorough, which we've not had a report like that from the state. And they gave us every indication that our request would be approved, which would be tremendous for city schools.
I know these, I can't remember the ops calendar in my head, and I know that these things, the CIP updates come on a regular basis. If we could sort of squeeze in agenda items in different meetings along the way, because there's a couple of things here that are going to be decided, like it would be lovely to find out the answer to this decision when it happens, rather than wait for, whenever it was supposed to come up. I won't be the chair probably beyond this meeting, but maybe I can squeeze in that little request before, you know what I mean? There's a lot of big stuff that you've raised that's kind of hanging out there, but great job, really great job.
The staff,
Great job.
Ms. Smith, everyone, great job.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. You too, Jacinta. I didn't say thank you to you, but I always thank you. All right, procurement. Sorry. I don't. I'm supposed to be upstairs at 11:30. I mean, I can. All right, procurement. What I'd like to do is just go item by item and see if there's any questions. Why is this not?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Jeff Parker, Director of Procurement.
So first item, air tech refrigeration and mechanical contractors. Okay, Liz isn't here, but I'm sure she'll be happy to know. Verizon. We have a quick question on Verizon.
I don't necessarily need an answer now, but in the future, it'd be great to see how this fits into an overall communication structure plan. It feels like we've seen various phones, and then the plan to phase out the point of the pods, the direct service. So just not now. We need to get through this. I didn't see any big issues with it, but just overall, so that it feels like we get nickeled and dimed a lot on this.
I felt the same thing, and I was reading it, and I was like, how does this relate to the last big thing we did, where we were going to save $1.8 million, like, it felt like immediately. Right. Then I thought, well, this just feels like the phone bill, because it's Verizon. So, I know somebody's laughing at me, but doesn't it, it is the phone bill,
Well, it
right?
also goes down to, like, if you do it out and divide the numbers per school and per unit for the freestanding phones, it's like $400 a month for phone service. So it would be nice to see big picture.
So I think that what you're, you're probably good at this, like, I feel like I need a cheat sheet. Like some master schematic that shows how, like you answered the last seemingly silly question I asked, that you said it was, one was the superhighway and one was the car. I was like, oh, okay, I got that. I'm not saying draw highways and cars, but some master cheat sheet that really does show how these things relate, because we're not really thinking we're getting nickeled and dimed, but we get a request that, to the uninitiated, I'm not pointing at Andy because he's more technologically inclined, I think, it feels like these requests come one right after the other, and we know they're related. We don't really think they're the same thing, but it's really hard to tell how they fit together. Is that fair? Yeah, you sure can. Yes, please. Somebody that knows something should actually speak.
Let me say, it makes complete sense.
I know.
Let me also say, the last time the board saw this action item, it was for a spend of $2.5 million. We have been working hard over the last year. It's now down to $900,000. and I am coming to the board in January with a holistic approach, that map that you're talking about to show how all these pieces come together. And I do believe when we meet the board and present it then, that 900 will probably turn into my hopes are, as a district, to get it down to maybe $200,000-300,000 a year. So yes, ma'am. So we've had over a 60-70% savings on this, and the team is still working diligently to bring it down even further. And we're only halfway down the road to bring this down to a very manageable number for the district. Yes.
And honestly, in the evidence of effectiveness, it's probably worth including that information just as a good
Absolutely.
reminder of what did you call it, the process of continuous improvement?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Questions? No, you don't need to rewrite this for the board meeting.
Okay.
That's a suggestion for future. We're good on this right now. Yeah, that's make work for them. Oh, our bus people. So the next one is the school bus transfer. So now that we've gotten clued in on all the transportation issues, this seems like the contract for the buses. Yes?
Correct. It's a supplemental agreement to our existing transportation contracts to provide 4 vendors and 22 additional routes at an annual cost of $2.5 million.
Oh, so this is supplemental. This isn't the contract. This is in addition to the.
This is awarding additional routes to a number of already approved vendors by the board.
This is supplemental in fiscal year 18,
Correct.
and what's the source?
The source of the funding
Is their budget, is our,
would
Yeah,
be the
where
general fund
the operating.
for
But
all
then-
transportation requirements.
It would be great to also see that
Oh, it's-
itemized out for how much is going to be submitted for reimbursement
Oh.
through special education. Just, again, to give people
Yeah.
a total understanding of real costs and
Sorry.
reimbursable costs.
Yeah, you want to clarify that, Andy?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes when I hear supplemental, at least when I used to be with the city, it meant it was an unbudgeted expense. So is this in the budget as an expense? There's a source for this?
So it's a part of the existing budget because it's also a reflection from us losing the contractor last year as a result of the accident. So it's replacing some of those routes as well as getting us additional resources for the number of students that have been added for services.
Right, but if there were additional cost, either because of the accident or because of the increased students, where, is this a supplemental amount that was not approved in the original fiscal year 18 budget? And if so, what is the source of funds? Is that-
John, it is a good question. John's shaking his head no.
Right, so it's not an additional,
Okay.
it's the
Okay.
same, juggling around the same financial resources that we have for the existing contract for the 315 routes that we run daily. So it's a shifting of resources, not necessarily an additional appropriation for yellow bus services.
Because if it was additional, we'd need to know if something goes up, something has to go down.
Right.
Okay. Good question.
Okay.
So there are no other questions on that one. Yes? ALEC Retro Environmental Asbestos Abatement Services. Any questions on that one? Miscellaneous electrical work. God forbid we should do without that. No questions on that. Healthcare supplies and equipment. School Health Corporation. You said you had a question on this one? No, I didn't have a question on this one either. Medical Care First. Oh, this is our healthcare. So we
Correct.
got point of service and I think the other one was the PPN.
And then Kaiser.
Okay, and then,
Essentially, if I may, just for the board, provide context, there are 3 contracts here, all pertaining to benefits. One's a point of service plan with Care First, the other is provider network, and the third is a self-insured plan with Kaiser.
So my question there is, we don't see one for prescription care coverage. Is that because we are not using a supplemental prescription care coverage?
We have an existing contract in place that goes for another year for prescription drugs.
Thank you. And then my other question, which will be my last on this, is with either the Care First or the Kaiser, are we leveraging this to get in my past experience, our healthcare provider has provided on staff or on-premises staff members to coordinate things like employee wellness, coordinated school health plans, a district-wide wellness committee, as is, ensured by the wellness policy. Are we using these dollars to try and get us some human capital?
In some ways, yes. So we have been working toward a district wellness plan, and each of these vendors has increased the share of a contribution that they make as part of this contract, to a financial contribution to our wellness work. They also come on site for benefits fairs that happen each year during open enrollment, which will be coming up at the end of October and beginning of November. So there are a couple ways that we are in fact doing that.
So the fairs and all that, that's great. There's nothing like having somebody on staff. So I just would suggest that we just push as hard as we can. It's not a big ask for them that 20% of their revenues have to go back to nonprofits. So for them having a Blue Cross or a Kaiser employee that is housed at city schools, it's an easy fix, easy win.
You're going to get this question over and over on all procurement items. We want to know what we're doing to talk to our vendors about how they can connect to the educational side of the mission. We brought this up a couple meetings ago, whether it's internships, apprenticeships, work with our CTE. This is not something you guys can just make happen, but we want to start to think that way about how these people get a lot of money for us. 200,000, 400,000, $1 million, 1.2. It's a lot of money, and it's important work. But there's got to be some way to look back inside of how they are being asked to contribute to our core mission. We don't have any significant questions, so we'll recommend these to the full board. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That's it. The next Operations Committee meeting is October 17th in this room at 10. Thank you.